I just want what's best for you. My mother said that 6 times on my wedding day. 6 times. I know, because by the third time, I started counting. She said it at the bridal suite. She said it when I showed her the seating chart. She said it when I told her the flower arrangements were already finalized. She said it while she was on the phone with my florist, pretending to be me, changing the order I'd spent 4 months choosing. My name is Rachel Ward. I'm 30 years old. And 20 minutes before I walked down the aisle, the wedding coordinator handed me a printed timeline I had never signed. My mother's handwriting was at the bottom. 6 changes. Every one of them designed to erase me from my own wedding. She didn't want to stop the wedding. She wanted to direct it. Like I was a guest at my own ceremony, and she was the one getting married. The coordinator handed it to me with an apology. I read the 6 changes standing in the hallway in my dress, with my veil in one hand and my phone in the other. Then, I made a decision. I would walk down the aisle. I would say my vows. I would smile for the photos she hadn't cut me from. And at the reception, in front of 123 guests, I would read every change she made, one by one, original and revision, side by side, out loud. If stories like mine matter to you, that subscribe button means more than you know. Let me take you back to where it started. Richmond, Virginia. A red brick colonial on Monument Avenue with white columns and a front porch that my mother, Patricia Ashford Ward, kept swept every morning because the neighbors might notice if she didn't. She was that kind of woman. Appearances weren't important to her. They were everything. My mother kept the living room magazine ready. The couch cushions were fluffed every morning. The coffee table books were arranged by color. The throw pillows, all 7 of them, had assigned positions. If I moved one to sit down, she'd replace it before I left the room. I once asked her why. She said, because company might come. Company never came on a Tuesday afternoon, but the pillows were always ready. She ironed napkins. For weeknight dinners, for a family of 4 eating chicken and rice on a Tuesday, she ironed cloth napkins. When I asked if paper would be fine, she said, paper napkins are for people who don't care about the details. I was 12. I was eating chicken fingers. I didn't need a press napkin. I needed a mother who noticed I was there without first checking if the table was set. My father, David Ward, was a tax attorney. Quiet man. Read biographies of presidents in a leather chair by the window. He'd been married to my mother for 34 years. He survived by agreeing. Not agreeing because he agreed. Agreeing because disagreeing cost more energy than he had after a day of reading tax code. He loved me. He just loved peace more. I've heard that sentence before in my own head, and it always sounds the same. My mother was a force. She chaired the PTA at collegiate school. She organized the church bazaar. She hosted the neighborhood Christmas party, 52 people, matching napkins, a live quartet. And she did it every December for 23 years without ever being asked and without ever letting anyone forget she hadn't been asked. She ran our family the way a stage manager runs a show. Every entrance timed, every line rehearsed, every exit planned. And if you deviated from her script, you didn't get a correction. You got a rewrite. I have an older sister, Caroline, 33, married, 2 children, lives in a Tudor in the West End with a Volvo and a golden retriever and a husband named Graham who works in wealth management and says absolutely too often. Caroline was my mother's production, the model output. The daughter who wore the right dresses and dated the right boys and got married at 25 in a ceremony my mother planned from the invitation font to the cake topper. Caroline's wedding was my mother's wedding. Everyone in Richmond knew it. Nobody said it. Caroline's wedding was the template. June 2018. The Jefferson Room at the Country Club. 210 guests. A 10-piece band. Roses and peonies in silver urns. A 7-tier cake from a bakery in D.C. that cost $3,000. My mother approved the dress, the shoes, the hair, the makeup, the readings, the music, the favors, the place cards, the programs, and the shade of lipstick Caroline wore for the formal portraits. Caroline wore blush pink. My mother chose it. Caroline didn't argue. Caroline never argued. Arguing was my department. At Caroline's reception, my mother gave a 12-minute toast. 12 minutes. She talked about raising daughters. She talked about family traditions. She talked about the Ward standard of excellence. She mentioned Graham's name 3 times. She mentioned Caroline's name 7 times. She mentioned herself 14 times. I counted. I was sitting at table 3, not table 1. Table 3. I was the bride's sister, and I was at table 3 because table 1 was for the immediate wedding party, and I was a reader, not a bridesmaid. My mother had made that decision 6 months before the wedding. She said the bridesmaid dresses wouldn't suit my frame. I was different, not rebellious. Just quiet in a way that made my mother nervous. I didn't push back. I just didn't push forward on her timeline. I wasn't the daughter who rebelled. I was the daughter who paused. And pausing, to my mother, was worse than rebellion. Rebellion she could argue with. Silence she could not control. When I was 14, I told her I didn't want to join the junior cotillion. Every girl in our neighborhood did it. Caroline had done it. My mother had organized the refreshments for 3 years running. When I said no, she didn't argue. She went quiet for 4 days. Then she signed me up anyway. I went. I danced with boys I didn't know in a ballroom I didn't choose. I wore a dress she'd picked out. I smiled for the photo she'd arranged. And I learned the most important lesson of my adolescence. In my mother's world, no was not an answer. It was a delay. I took a year off after college to travel. She told the neighbors I was finding herself. I moved to an apartment in the Fan District instead of the West End. She told the church I was being independent. I started dating a man named Owen Barrett, who was a high school English teacher instead of a lawyer or a banker. She told no one. Owen was everything my mother didn't plan for. He wore corduroys. He drove a 12-year-old Subaru with a dent in the fender and a bumper sticker that said, "I'd rather be reading." He taught 9th grade English at Henrico High and coached the debate team. He made $41,000 a year, and he was the happiest person I'd ever met. He read poems out loud while he cooked, not performatively. Just because he liked the way words sounded while pasta water boiled. He once read me the entirety of the love song of Jay, Alfred Prufrock, while making spaghetti carbonara. I didn't understand half of it. I understood all of him. Owen and I dated for 2 years before I brought him home. Not because I was ashamed of him, because I was ashamed of what my mother would do with him. She'd measure him the way she measured everything, against a standard he didn't know existed and couldn't compete with because the standard wasn't about quality. It was about category. And Owen was in the wrong category. He was kind. He was smart. He was funny in a way that didn't announce itself. The humor was in the observation, not the delivery. He noticed things nobody else noticed. He noticed that I always ordered my coffee before I sat down because I didn't like waiting with empty hands. He noticed that I touched the spine of every book I passed in a bookstore. He noticed that I hummed when I was nervous and that the song was always Somewhere Over the Rainbow because my mother used to sing it to me before she stopped singing anything at all. He said once, on a Tuesday night in our apartment while we were grading papers at the same table, he grading essays, me grading marketing plans for my small consulting business. "You hum when you're thinking about her. You know that, right?" I did know. I just didn't know anyone else had noticed. My mother met Owen exactly once before we got engaged. A dinner at the house on Monument Avenue. She served lamb. She asked him what firm he was with. He said he taught high school. She set down her fork and looked at my father the way you look at a contractor who's installed the wrong tile. Teaching, she said. How rewarding. She said rewarding, the way you'd say interesting about a dress you'd never wear. After dinner, in the kitchen, while I was loading the dishwasher, Rachel, he's lovely. But he's a teacher. I know what he is, Mom. You could do so much better. I'm not trying to do better. I'm trying to be happy. She rinsed a glass, set it in the rack, dried her hands on the linen towel that hung from the oven handle on a magnetic hook because regular hooks left marks. Happiness is temporary, Rachel. Security is structural. I didn't respond. There's no argument that penetrates a woman who believes love is a floor plan. We moved in together after a year. A one-bedroom in the fan. $750 a month. No dishwasher. A radiator that clanked at 3 in the morning. Owen called it the apartment's heartbeat. He named things. The draft under the door was Gary. The spider in the bathroom was Eleanor. He gave everything a name because he believed that naming things made them real, and real things deserved respect. My mother visited the apartment once. She stood in the doorway and looked at the kitchen, small, yellow tile, a dish rack on the counter because there was no dishwasher, and said, "It's cozy." She said cozy, the way she said rewarding about teaching. Like a compliment that arrives empty. What she didn't see, because she left after 20 minutes and didn't look at the second bedroom, was the office I'd built. A desk from a thrift store on Broad Street. $45. Solid oak. A scratch across the top that I covered with a leather desk pad from Marshall's. A used MacBook Air I'd bought from a student at VCU for $400. And a filing cabinet I'd found on the curb in the fan on bulk pickup day. Somebody's trash. My infrastructure. I'd started a consulting business. Small. Just me. Marketing strategy for local businesses that couldn't afford a firm but needed more than a Canva template and a prayer. I called it Ward Consulting. My name. My business cards were printed at a FedEx on Grace Street, 200 for $18. I kept them in a ceramic bowl on my thrift store desk like mints at a restaurant. My first client was a barbershop in Jackson Ward. 3 chairs. A barber named Marcus who'd been cutting hair for 20 years and didn't have a website. I built him one in a weekend. Squarespace. 12 hours. He paid me $500 and a free haircut for Owen. It was the first invoice I ever sent. I printed it on regular paper because I didn't have letterhead yet. Marcus looked at it and said, "This is what professional looks like." I kept that invoice in the filing cabinet. I still have it. The second client was a bakery on Carey Street, a woman named Dorothy who made sourdough and cinnamon rolls and couldn't figure out why her Instagram had 53 followers when her bread was the best in the fan. I set up her social media, designed a logo, and ran a 3-week promotion that cost her $40 in boosted posts and brought in $1,100 in new orders. She cried when she saw the sales report. She said, "I've been making bread for 6 years and nobody told me this was possible." I said, "Nobody told me either. I figured it out at the kitchen table." That was the truth. I worked at the kitchen table. Every night. Owen on one side grading 9th grade essays red pen, a stack of papers held down by a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Teacher" that his students had given him and me on the other side with the MacBook, and a spiral notebook full of client strategies and projected revenue charts I drew by hand because I liked seeing the lines go up. We worked in parallel. Owen would read a sentence aloud from a student's essay, Romeo was down bad for Juliet, and that was basically the whole play, and I'd laugh so hard I'd lose my place in the spreadsheet. He'd look up and say, "This kid's not wrong, technically." And we'd both go back to work. That was our evening. Every night. Two people building two different things at the same table. Not for each other. Next to each other, which is its own kind of love. By the end of the first year, I had 7 clients. Revenue, $41,000. Not enough to quit the part-time work I still did on the side, 3 shifts a week at a wine bar in Chaco Slip, but enough to see the shape of something real. By the end of the second year, 14 clients. Revenue, $78,000. I quit the wine bar. I upgraded the MacBook to a MacBook Pro with a 27-inch monitor that barely fit on the thrift store desk. I bought a proper printer, a Brother laser, black and white only, because color was a luxury and I was my mother's daughter in exactly one way. I knew what things cost. The irony was not lost on me. Security is structural, my mother had said. She meant a husband, a house, a floor plan. She meant the kind of security that requires someone else to provide it. What she didn't mean, what she would never mean, was a woman building security out of a $45 desk, a used laptop, and a ceramic bowl of business cards in a 1-bedroom apartment with a radiator named Harold. But that's exactly what security looked like for me. Not structural, earned, not inherited, built, not given by a man in a Lexus. Made by a woman at a kitchen table across from a man in corduroys who earned $41,000 a year and was the richest person I knew. Owen proposed on a Saturday morning in November. We were at the farmer's market on 17th Street. He was holding a bag of apples and a sourdough loaf. He set them down on a bench next to the flower vendor, got on one knee on the brick sidewalk, and pulled out a ring he'd had made by a jeweler in Carytown. A simple band. 1 small stone. Not a diamond. A sapphire. Blue. Like my eyes, he said. He'd been saving for 6 months. He could have bought a bigger stone. He chose the right one. I said yes before he finished the sentence. My mother's reaction, delivered that evening over the phone. "Well, we should start planning." Not congratulations. Not "I'm so happy for you." We should start planning. Like the engagement was an assignment and the deadline had just been posted. And plan she did. Or tried to. For the next 11 months, my mother attempted to build my wedding the way she'd built Caroline's as a production she controlled. I resisted. Quietly. Consistently. Not with arguments. With decisions. I chose the venue, a restored tobacco warehouse on the canal in Chaco Bottom. Exposed brick. String lights. Industrial elegance. My mother wanted the country club. The Jefferson Room has better lighting. I said no. Once, I chose the flowers. Wildflowers and eucalyptus, arranged loosely in mason jars. My mother wanted roses and hydrangeas in crystal vases. Wildflowers look like you picked them from a highway median. I said no. Once, I chose the photographer, Owen's friend Kelsey Mitchell, who shot weddings on film because she said digital forgets too fast. My mother wanted a studio photographer from the West End with a drone and a website full of posed couples. Kelsey doesn't even have a studio. I said no. Once, I chose the music, a string trio, not a band. Strings are for funerals, Rachel. I said no. Once, I chose the invitations, letterpress on recycled cotton, designed by a woman in Scott's Addition who worked out of her garage. My mother wanted engraved on crane paper from a stationery shop on Libby Avenue. Letterpress looks handmade. It was handmade. That was the point. I said no. Once, Owen chose his own suit. He told my mother at dinner one evening, casually, that he'd found one at a consignment shop. She asked how much. He said $80. She didn't respond. She cut her lamb into smaller and smaller pieces for the rest of the meal. My father later told me she'd called 2 tailors the next morning asking about rush alterations for the groom. Both tailors said they'd need the groom present. Owen never went. Each no cost me. Not in argument. In silence. My mother's silence was her most expensive weapon. She didn't yell. She went quiet. For days. Then she'd call as if nothing had happened and suggest something new. A different caterer. A different cake flavor. A different color for the bridesmaids. Each suggestion wrapped in, "I just want what's best for you," like a gift, with a tag that says, "From Mom," but the box is empty. What I didn't know, what I didn't find out until 20 minutes before I walked down the aisle, was that she hadn't stopped at suggestions. She'd gone behind me. Here's what she did. 6 changes. 6 phone calls to 6 different vendors. Each one impersonating me. She moved Owen's entire family from our table to table 11 near the kitchen. She moved his 86-year-old grandmother to a raised platform that required 3 steps. She replaced my wildflowers with her roses. She rewrote the photography shot list so that I appeared in 2 of 14 photos at my own wedding. She cut Owen's vows from 3 minutes to 1 and added a blessing from the bride's mother I'd specifically declined. She replaced our ceremony reading with 1 Corinthians 13. And she called the bakery to swap our custom cake topper, a man holding a book, a woman laughing for a generic one. Ours was put in a box behind the counter. 6 changes. 6 lies told under the umbrella of the bride's mother says. All without my knowledge. All without Owen's knowledge. All executed in 3 weeks while I was at fittings and doing all the things a bride does when she trusts that the plan she made is the plan being followed. I found out 20 minutes before the ceremony. Amanda Bell, the coordinator, is a professional. She'd been doing weddings for 14 years. But something had nagged her. 3 of the 6 changes had come in the same week. All by phone. None confirmed by email from me directly. So she printed the revised timeline with my mother's handwritten notes and brought it to the bridal suite. "Rachel, I just want to confirm you approved these changes." I looked at the paper. My mother's handwriting. The cursive she'd used on every Christmas card, every PTA sign-up sheet, every note left on the kitchen counter. 6 changes. All marked in her hand. I read them, standing in a hallway in a wedding dress. My maid of honor, Beth, standing next to me with a flute of champagne she'd forgotten she was holding. What would you have done? If you were standing in a wedding dress, 20 minutes from the aisle, holding proof that your own mother had rewritten your entire wedding behind your back, would you cancel? Would you confront her? Would you walk down the aisle and pretend? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did what I've always done when my mother overrode me. I went very still. And then I started making a list. Amanda, I need copies. The original seating chart. The original flower order. The original shot list. The original timeline. Everything she changed, and everything I actually signed. Amanda nodded. She didn't ask why. 14 years of weddings. She'd seen controlling mothers. She'd seen last-minute changes. She'd seen brides cry in hallways and grooms pace in parking lots and fathers of the bride get drunk before the ceremony. But she told me later she'd never seen a mother submit 6 separate unauthorized revisions to 6 different vendors over 3 weeks using her daughter's name. That's not a mother of the bride, Amanda said. That's a campaign. Beth stood beside me in the hallway. She'd set down the champagne flute on a windowsill, and she hadn't picked it up again. She was looking at the folder the way you look at a loaded weapon when someone you love is deciding whether to use it. What are you gonna do? I'm going to get married. And then I'm going to read. Beth nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't ask if I was sure. She knew me. She knew that the quiet ones don't explode. They document, and then they present. If you think she should have canceled the ceremony and confronted her mother right there, I understand. But that wasn't the play. The play was the reception. 123 guests. My mother, in her pewter mother of the bride dress, seated at table 1, with a microphone, stand 12 feet away. I walked into the ceremony with the folder under my arm, tucked against the bouquet. Nobody saw it. Beth knew. Amanda knew. The rest of the world thought I was carrying flowers. The ceremony was beautiful. That part, my mother couldn't touch. I walked down the aisle to a cello version of Moon River that Owen had chosen. My father held my arm. He didn't know about the changes. He wouldn't have known how to handle it if he did. He squeezed my hand twice. That was his version of a speech. Owen stood at the end of the aisle in a navy suit. He'd bought it at a consignment shop in Carytown for $80. He cried when he saw me. Not the performative tears of a man who knows he's supposed to cry. The real kind. The kind where your chin does the thing before your eyes do. Owen's vows were supposed to be 3 minutes. My mother's revised timeline, said one, but Amanda ignored the revision she'd been tipped off by then. Owen spoke for 3 minutes and 12 seconds. He said he fell in love with me the day I organized his bookshelf by publication date instead of alphabetically because I said books should be read in the order they arrived in the world. He said he loved a woman who organized the world by when things happened, not by what they were called. He said he would spend the rest of his life learning the order of things. I said my vows. I'd written them on an index card. I said that Owen was the first person who'd ever noticed that I hummed when I was nervous. I said he was the first person who made the humming stop. Not because he fixed the nervousness, because he made me feel like the nervousness was just part of the song. We kissed. 123 people clapped. My mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief she'd monogrammed. The monogram said, Pa. Patricia Ashford Ward. Even her tears had her initials on them. The reception started at 6. The warehouse was lit with Edison bulbs and candles. The tables were set with white linen. The flowers were roses and hydrangeas in crystal vases. Not my flowers. Hers. I noticed immediately. The roses on table 1, the crystal catching the Edison bulb light. Not a mason jar in sight. Not a stem of eucalyptus. Not a single wildflower. My mother's vision, substituted for mine, sitting in vases on 13 tables in a room of 123 people who would assume this is what the bride wanted. Owen didn't notice. He was talking to his best man, Pete, who taught history at the same school and who was already 2 drinks in, and telling a story about a student who'd written an essay arguing that the Roman Empire fell because of bad vibes. I walked past the flowers and ran my hand along a crystal vase. Cool. Smooth. Not a mason jar. Not eucalyptus. Not mine. Beth came up behind me. Those aren't your flowers. No. What are you going to do? I'm going to wait. The reception started at 6. The tobacco warehouse was warm, with 123 bodies and candles on every table. The Edison bulbs hung from the ceiling like constellations. The exposed brick glowed amber in the light. It was exactly what I'd imagined when I'd booked it 14 months ago. Everything I'd chosen was there, the venue, the string trio, the caterer. And everything my mother had replaced was also there, the crystal vases, the roses, the wrong topper on the cake. 2 versions of the same wedding, mine underneath, hers on top. Owen noticed the flowers during cocktail hour. He looked at the rose arrangement on the bar table and said, I thought we were doing wildflowers. We were. He looked at me. I looked at him. He didn't ask. He just put his hand on my shoulder and said, Whatever you're going to do, I'm with you. That's the man I married. He doesn't ask for the plan. He asks if I need a minute. Dinner was served. The caterer, at least, was unchanged. Farm to table. Local. Exactly what I'd ordered. My mother hadn't touched the food, probably because she couldn't figure out who to call. During dinner, I watched my mother. She was at table 1, center seat. She was talking to Aunt Helen, my father's sister, about the flower arrangements. "Don't they look beautiful?" she said. "I spent months on the colors. My flowers. My colors. Except they weren't my flowers or my colors. They were hers. And she was taking credit for them to the sister-in-law who'd already seen my original Pinterest board." Aunt Helen smiled politely. She'd been smiling politely at my mother for 34 years. It was her primary facial expression at Ward family events. Owen's mother, Barbara, was eating quietly at table 11. She'd said nothing about the seating. She's not the kind of woman who complains. She's the kind who notices, files it away, and waits to see if anyone else brings it up first. She caught my eye once during the main course. I held her look for 3 seconds. She nodded. One nod. The kind that says, "I see it too." After dessert, my mother stood up. She was seated at table 1, center seat. She picked up the microphone from the stand and began what she'd planned as a surprise toast. "I am so proud of my daughter," she started. "This day is everything I ever dreamed for her. Everything she ever dreamed. Her flowers, her seating chart, her timeline, her cake topper. Everything she ever dreamed for me was, quite literally, everything she had changed about the plan I'd made for myself." She spoke for 4 minutes. She mentioned Owen once. She mentioned his family 0 times. She mentioned the venue, the flowers, and the beautiful traditions of the Ward family 3 times. When she sat down, the room clapped. Polite claps. The kind you give at a PTA meeting. Then I stood up. Owen squeezed my hand under the table. One squeeze. Not a question. A confirmation. Beth handed me the folder from under the table. It was a manila folder. Standard. Office supply. The most unassuming weapon in the room. I didn't pick up the microphone right away. I let the silence settle. 3 seconds. 4. 5. I could feel 123 sets of eyes adjust. Some people shifted in their chairs. A chair leg scraped the concrete floor. I picked up the microphone. "Thank you, Mom, for the toast and for everything else you did behind the scenes." She smiled. She didn't understand yet. "I want to share something with everyone here tonight. Because this wedding is about transparency. And I've recently learned that not everything about this day was transparent." I pulled a folder from under the head table. Amanda had placed it there during dinner. Inside, printouts. The original documents I'd signed. And the revisions my mother had called in. "Change number 1, I said. The seating chart. I held up both copies, side by side. My left hand, my original, with my signature at the bottom. My right hand, my mother's revision, with her handwriting and Amanda's initials where she'd processed it. The room leaned forward. Not one person. All of them. The collective shift of 123 bodies tipping toward the truth. In my original plan, Owen's parents were at table 2, our family table. My mother called the coordinator 3 weeks ago and moved them to table 11, next to the kitchen entrance. I looked at Owen's mother, Barbara. She was at table 11, near the kitchen. She looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Not anger, relief. Like she'd been carrying a suspicion and someone had just confirmed it. Owen's grandmother, Edith, was at the raised table. She'd needed help with the 3 steps. Owen had to carry the walker. He'd thought it was a venue error. It wasn't. Change number 2. The flowers. I held up 2 invoices. The original wildflowers and eucalyptus in mason jars, paid by me, confirmed by me, chosen by me 4 months ago during a consultation at Stems and Light where I'd sat for 2 hours with Diane Fowler looking at pictures of arrangements until we found the one that felt right. And the revision roses and hydrangeas in crystal vases, called in by a voice that identified itself as Mrs. Ward, the bride's mother, and said, Rachel changed her mind. I did not change my mind. My mother changed my flowers. Those are not the same thing. I pointed to the crystal vases on the tables nearest me. These are not my flowers. These are my mother's flowers. At my wedding. On my tables. For my guests. Without my permission. The room shifted again. Not a lean this time. A current. Something electrical that moves through a group of people when they realize they're all inside a story that's happening right now. Diane Fowler was in the room. She'd come as a guest. I'd invited her because she'd been so patient during the planning. She set down her wine glass. Her face went pale. She looked at my mother. Then at the crystal vases on every table that she'd arranged under false instructions. Change number 3. The photography. I held up both shot lists. The room was completely silent now. Not polite silence. Loaded silence. I had 22 shots. My mother submitted a revised list to my photographer. The revision has 14 shots. 6 of my 8 personal shots were removed. I am in 2 of 14 photographs at my own wedding. Kelsey, who is standing by the east wall with her camera still around her neck, lowered it slowly. Caroline, my sister, shifted in her seat. She was at table 1, next to my mother. Her face had the expression of someone watching a controlled demolition from too close. Graham said absolutely under his breath. Nobody knew what he was agreeing to. My college roommate Amy, who was at table 5, put her fork down and pulled out her phone. Not to record. To text. I found out later she sent one message to 3 people. You need to see this. Mrs. Addison, my mother's co-chair from the bazaar committee, was at table 4. She set her napkin on the table, folded it. Precisely. The way you fold something when you're deciding what to do with your hands, because you can't decide what to do with your face. Owen's best man Pete leaned back in his chair. He teaches history. He recognizes a moment when one is happening. Change number 4. The timeline. I held up the revised ceremony timeline. My mother moved the ceremony forward 15 minutes. She cut Owen's vows from 3 minutes to 1. She added a blessing from the bride's mother, a blessing I had specifically declined in March when she suggested it. She wrote it in, signed it, and submitted it to Amanda as an approved change. Amanda, who was standing by the kitchen door with a headset around her neck, nodded once. Not to take credit. To confirm, this is what happened. This is what she handed me in the hallway. Owen looked at me from a seat. He hadn't known about the vow reduction. His 3 minutes and 12 seconds had survived only because Amanda had ignored the revision. He looked at the timeline in my hand, then at my mother, and I watched something cross his face that I'd never seen before. Not anger. Owen doesn't do anger. Disappointment. The kind that comes from learning someone tried to edit the most honest thing you've ever said. Change number 5. The ratings. Owen and I chose an excerpt from Captain Corelli's Mandolin, a passage about love that we both underlined in the same book on the same night without knowing the other was reading it. My mother called Pastor Reynolds and replaced it with 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. Love is kind. The most generic wedding reading in the history of weddings. She replaced our passage, the one we found together, with the one every mother picks because it sounds nice on a program. Pastor Reynolds, who was seated at table 6, closed his eyes. He'd made the switch because the bride's mother called and said the bride had changed her mind. Why would he question it? Mothers don't sabotage their daughters' weddings. Except when they do. Change number 6. The cake topper. Owen and I had a custom piece made. A man holding a book. A woman laughing. My mother called the bakery and replaced it with a standard topper. Our custom piece was put in a box behind the counter. Do you think she should have stopped there? Or read the last change, too? If you already know the answer, drop it in the comments. I set the folder down. I looked at my mother. She was sitting very still. Her hands were in her lap. The monogrammed handkerchief was folded next to her plate. Her face had the expression of a building that's been told it failed inspection. Mom, I love you. I have always loved you. But you didn't plan this wedding for me. You planned it for you. And I need everyone in this room to know that the woman who just gave a toast about being proud of her daughter spent 3 weeks dismantling the decisions that daughter made. The room was silent for 7 seconds. Then Barbara Owen's mother stood up from table 11. She picked up her plate, her glass, and her napkin. She walked across the room to table 2. She sat down in the seat my mother had reassigned. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. 122 people watched Owen's mother reclaim her seat. Owen's grandmother, Edith, couldn't move herself. But Pete, the best man, the history teacher, walked to the platform, lifted the walker, and helped Edith down the 3 steps. He walked her to the ground floor table, the table she'd been assigned to originally, the table my mother had moved her away from. The room began to shift, not dramatically, quietly, like tectonic plates. Owen's aunt moved from table 9 to table 3. One of Owen's college friends moved to sit next to his dad. The room rearranged itself. My mother's seating chart dissolved in real time. My father sat at table 1. He hadn't moved. His hands were flat on the table. His face was the face of a man who has spent 34 years agreeing and has just realized what agreement costs. Caroline leaned to my mother and whispered something. My mother didn't respond. She was staring at the crystal vases. Her vases, on tables that were now occupied by people she'd tried to separate. Beth, my maid of honor, walked to the bakery display table in the back of the room. She returned with a box. Inside, the custom cake topper. The man holding a book. The woman laughing. Beth set it on the table in front of me. I called sugar this morning, she said. I had a feeling. Owen took the topper. He removed the generic one from the cake. He placed ours on top. Then he turned to me and said, "That's better." 123 people laughed. Not a polite laugh. The real kind. The relieved kind. The kind that says the worst is over and the right people are at the right tables and the flowers were wrong, but the cake topper is finally right. Owen stood beside me. He hadn't said a word during the entire reading. He didn't need to. He put his hand on the small of my back. Not a grip. A presence. The kind that says, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and this is yours, and you're doing it right. My mother's face had gone through 4 distinct stages during the reading. Confusion, recognition, anger, and finally, the one I'd been waiting for, the blank expression of a woman who has run out of narrative. She had no story left to tell. The receipts were on the table. The room had seen them. And there was no phone call she could make to undo what 123 people had just heard. My mother left 20 minutes later. She didn't make a scene. She stood up, picked up her clutch, and walked to the door. My father followed. He paused at the exit and looked back at me. One look. The kind that carries 34 years of I know and I'm sorry and I couldn't and I wish I had. Then he followed her out. The way he always follows her out. My father has spent 34 years following my mother through doors, into rooms, out of rooms, into decisions, out of accountability. He follows because following is easier than standing still and admitting that the direction was wrong. The parking lot door closed behind him. The string trio, which had stopped playing during the reading, started again. Something soft. Something that filled the silence without demanding attention. The cellist, a woman named Miranda, who'd played at the ceremony, looked at me and nodded. Just once. The nod of someone who understood what had just happened and was choosing to keep playing. Caroline stayed. She stayed the entire reception. She danced with Owen. She danced with Pete. She danced with her own husband, Graham, who kept saying, "Absolutely," every time someone asked if he was okay. At the end of the night, she found me by the bar. I knew she called the florist. I didn't know about the rest. You knew? She told me about the flowers at brunch last week. She said she was fixing a mistake. You didn't think she'd go further. No. She always goes further, Caroline. You just never had to stand in the hallway and read it. She didn't respond. She hugged me. It was the first honest hug my sister had given me in 10 years. Within 3 months, the truth rippled through Richmond, the way gossip travels in a city that calls itself a big town. My mother stepped down from the church bazaar committee. She told people it was a scheduling conflict. Mrs. Addison, who'd co-chaired with her for 9 years, told Aunt Helen she'd received 11 calls from women who'd been at the wedding, all asking the same question. Did you know? My mother stopped hosting the Christmas party. For the first time in 23 years, the house on Monument Avenue didn't have matching napkins in December. 3 of her closest friends, women she'd had lunch with every Thursday at the Commonwealth Club, quietly rescheduled, then rescheduled again, then stopped scheduling. Diane Fowler, the florist, sent me a handwritten note. I'm sorry, I didn't verify. In 14 years, no mother has ever done that to a bride's order. She refunded my entire flower bill. She said she'd never take another call from the bride's mother without written confirmation. My father called me 2 weeks after the wedding. His voice was different, thinner, like a wall with the plaster scraped off. Your mother says she was trying to help. She changed my flowers, my seating chart, my photos, my timeline, my readings, and my cake topper. That's not help, Dad. That's a hostile takeover. Silence. She says you humiliated her. She humiliated me, Dad. In writing. With a phone. For 3 weeks. She changed my flowers, my seating chart, my photos, my timeline, my readings, and my cake topper. 6 phone calls. 6 lies. She identified herself as the bride's mother and used that title to override every decision I made for my own wedding. I didn't humiliate her. I read the receipts out loud. If the receipts are humiliating, that's because what she did was humiliating. More silence. The long kind. The kind where you can hear a man deciding whether to defend his wife or acknowledge his daughter. I'm not taking sides, Rachel. You've been not taking sides for 34 years, Dad. That's a side. Neutrality between someone who lies and someone who tells the truth is not neutrality. It's permission. He didn't call again for 2 months. Aunt Helen called me a week after the wedding. She's my father's sister. Quiet like him, but with a spine he never grew. I've wanted to say this for 20 years, Rachel. Your mother ran that family like a production, and your father let her, and I let him let her. We all watched. Nobody said anything. Why not? Because she's so good at it. She makes you think you're the one who's wrong. She makes you think the napkins actually need to be ironed. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed about any of it. Your wedding, Helen continued. What you did? That took guts. More guts than any of us have shown in 30 years. I just read a folder, Aunt Helen. You read the truth. In a room full of people who'd been living with a revision. That's not reading. That's an act of God. Owen and I settled into married life in the Fan District apartment. We kept the custom cake topper on a shelf in the kitchen. The man holding the book, the woman laughing. It's the first thing I see when I make coffee in the morning. 2 months after the wedding, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a crystal vase. Empty. Clean. One of the ones from the wedding from the arrangement my mother had ordered. A note was taped to the bottom, in Amanda Bell's handwriting. I saved one. Fill it with whatever you want. I put wildflowers in it. Eucalyptus and daisies from the farmer's market. Owen set it on the kitchen windowsill next to his herb pot. It sits there now. A crystal vase my mother ordered, filled with the flowers she tried to replace. It's the most honest thing in our apartment. Kelsey reshot all the photos I'd been cut from. The first look, the dress, the veil, the bridesmaids. She did it for free. She said, every bride deserves to be in her own wedding photos. Caroline and I talk more now than we have in years. She came to dinner last month with her kids. She brought a bottle of wine and a store-bought cake that wasn't as good as the wedding cake, but was hers to bring. She didn't mention Mom. She didn't need to. My mother hasn't apologized. She hasn't acknowledged what she did. The last thing she said to Caroline about the wedding was, I don't understand why she made a scene. I made a scene. She made 6 unauthorized phone calls, rewrote my wedding, erased me from my own photographs, and moved an 86-year-old woman up 3 steps. I read a folder out loud, and she thinks I'm the one who made a scene. I set one condition for reconciliation. She writes down the 6 changes and acknowledges each one was wrong. Not, I was trying to help. Not, I just wanted what's best. She writes, I changed your flowers. I moved your guests. I cut you from your photos. I rewrote your timeline. I replaced your readings. I swapped your cake topper. I did it without your permission. I was wrong. She hasn't done it. I don't think she will. My mother doesn't write apologies. She writes revisions. And revisions, by definition, erase the original. Diane Fowler came to our 1-year anniversary dinner at the warehouse. Same venue. Same string lights. This time, the flowers were wildflowers and eucalyptus in mason jars. She arranged them herself. No charge. She said, these are the ones you should have had. Owen helped her carry the jars in from her van. He was wearing the same navy suit. Still $80. Still the right one. Beth gave a toast. 3 minutes. She mentioned Owen 4 times. She mentioned me 6 times. She mentioned my mother 0 times. It was, by every measure, the toast my wedding should have had the first time. So the door stays where it is. Not locked. Not open. Just still. My name is Rachel Ward. I'm 30 years old. I married a man who reads poems while he cooks and cried when he saw me in my dress and earns $41,000 a year and is worth more than every crystal vase in Richmond. My mother planned my wedding from behind my back, and I read every change to 123 guests. She left before the cake was cut. The topper was ours. The man holding the book. The woman laughing. Some mothers plan weddings for their daughters. Some mothers plan weddings for themselves and put their daughter's name on the invitation. If you've ever had to reclaim something that was supposed to be yours from the start, you know the weight of it. And you know the relief of setting it down in front of a room full of people and saying, this is mine. This was always mine. I'll be right here on the porch when you're ready for the next one.